This is Mr. Blinken's 8th trip to the region since the conflict broke out in October. Before heading for Israel, he delivered a clear message for the warring parties and for the wider region.
My message to governments throughout the region, to people throughout the region is, if you want a ceasefire, press Hamas to say yes. If you want to alleviate the terrible suffering of Palestinians in Gaza, press Hamas to say yes. If you want to get all the hostages home, press Hamas to say yes. The only party that has not accepted, the only party that's not said yes, is Hamas. That's who everyone's waiting on. That's who the Palestinians in Gaza are waiting on. It's who the Israelis are waiting on. It's who the hostages and the hostage families are waiting on. It's who the entire region and the entire world is waiting on. And so we'll see. Does Hamas want to end this conflict, end this war that it started, or not? We'll find out. But it's clear that virtually the entire world has come together in support of the proposal. And the only open question is, will Hamas...
Let's take a closer look at this with journalist Sami Sockol in Jerusalem. Welcome back to DW, Sami. We've just heard Antony Blinken telling the world to press Hamas to say yes to this latest ceasefire deal. Has Israel said yes yet?
Well, that's a very good question. If you heard the speech given by Benny Gantz yesterday, he urged upon Netanyahu to be courageous and accept this deal. And in fact, there is a deal that has been accepted by Netanyahu and by the war cabinet. And the details of this deal were actually exposed today to the Israeli public. This deal is very similar to what we heard from Biden himself. But immediately after Biden's speech, there was a pressure from the Israeli right, the far right-wing parties that are saying that they will resign from the government if this deal will go ahead. And Netanyahu, so it seems, has changed the language. And he has been claiming that Israel would be able to continue the war after the first stage. But in the deal that was exposed on Channel 12 today, it actually says that the ceasefire, or as it's called here, the temporary cessation of military operations by both sides, should continue throughout this period.
OK, so there is at the very least some sort of movement, because this is the Secretary of State's, I think, 8th tour of the Middle East without a deals. But he can go back to Washington saying there is some movement.
Yeah, well, there is a deal on the table. And there is, I can say, on the Israeli side, public support for this deal. Another network has announced that in a poll that they conducted, 49% of the public supports such a deal, as opposed to only 32% of the public who are against. And this deal talks clearly about, as the way it was presented to the public, as a deal that would bring about a ceasefire and the release of thousands of Palestinian prisoners in return for the release of the Israeli hostages. So the Israeli public is willing to pay the price. We also see it in the Israeli parliament. There's an overwhelming support for this kind of a deal. If we look at the government, we see that the ultra-Orthodox parties, Shas, and Agudat Israel, United Torah Judaism, they support it. But the problem is that the far right and Netanyahu have not come out to support this.
OK. And now that Benny Gantz has resigned, as he did over the weekend, does that mean that Mr. Netanyahu is even more beholden now to the right-wing elements of the government?
Yes, indeed. This is the situation. It seems that Netanyahu had a choice. He could have tried to appease Gantz and made him stay with him together, but he decided rather to be on the same page together with the far right in his government. And in that way, he's actually closing the door on a possibility for a ceasefire. These right-wing, far right-wing parties, they talk about settling the Gaza Strip with Jewish settlements. And they're totally against any kind of compromise and release of Palestinian prisoners.
Okay, so we've got differing forces, haven't we? You said there was momentum for this deal. Benny Gantz leaving the government strengthens the hand of the right wing, who are very much anti this deal. Is Mr. Gantz's departure likely to make any difference to the way that Benjamin Netanyahu prosecutes this war?
Well, what we expect now is actually more of the same. Had Gantz stayed in the government, then we would have probably gone towards a direction of a ceasefire, a prisoner swap, and if that would happen, maybe there would have been also some kind of agreement with Lebanon, Hezbollah, and so forth, and being on board with the American regional plans and so forth. But since Gantz is out, it seems that Netanyahu will be pushing for more of the same, which means more of the military campaign inside the Gaza Strip.